All right, so today is Wednesday, September 24th. And this is something I'm going to try to put out each Wednesday now until at least the end of this year's regular season. Try to do some sort of power ranking video after each week. Now, just gonna get straight into it and talk about four teams at a time, going from 32 all the way to 1. 32, 31, 30, and 29. I have these teams as the New Orleans Saints at 32, the New York Giants at 31, the Jets at 30, and the Dolphins at 29. All four of these teams are winless. All four of these teams last week lost in, honestly, their own fashion. New Orleans got blown out by almost 40 points. The Giants lost by 13, but it was kind of a dominating win by the Chiefs. The New York Jets had a heartbreaking loss where they returned a kickoff, or not a kickoff, but a field goal for a touchdown, and then allowed a field goal within the last couple of minutes. And Miami got beat up pretty good by the Buffalo Bills. At 28, I have the Tennessee Titans, another team that is winless, but I feel like compared to the other four teams before them, we feel better, at least I feel better about the fact that this is an offense that is in its only third, fourth week. It's an offense still in its infancy. And so I think Cam Ward has shown some good things throughout these first 3 weeks. But again, they haven't looked great. So 28, I think, fits pretty well for them. Houston, as much as this pains me, I have them at 27. I feel really bad about where this Texans team is currently with this offense. They got rid of Bobby Slowick at the end of last year in hopes that, the offensive coordinator was the issue, but it seems like the issues have only gotten worse as they are winless through 3 games so far. The Las Vegas Raiders, the first team so far that's gotten a win. However, they have not won a game in 2 weeks. They lost on Sunday last week against a Washington Commanders team that was out without their starting quarterback, and they allowed 45 points to get put on their head. So feel pretty bad about the Raiders, if I'm being honest with you. The Denver Broncos, for the second straight week, have lost to a team that I think, honestly, they could have beat. I know it was a last-second loss against the LA Chargers on a field goal, but they just haven't looked good this year. I think this was a team I was really expecting to be pushing for the AFC West title, especially given that Kansas City is struggling and the Raiders are going to be the Raiders. But the Chargers kind of took care of business against Denver, and now Denver is sitting at 1-2. At 24, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't feel good about any team that gets beat by almost 40 points. That's why I have the Saints at 32, and that's why I have the Bengals at 24. You can't really give the excuse that they were playing without their starting quarterback because the Vikings were doing the same thing. And I think Jake Browning at this point in his career is probably a better player than Carson Wentz is, and I think that's a really bad showcase for that defense to allow what happened to them. I know that there were 2 defensive touchdowns and there were a lot of turnovers by the Cincinnati Bengals offense, but defensively, this needed to be a game where they flexed their muscle a little bit and showed why Shamar Stewart deserved his contract and first-round pick billing. Trey Hendrickson deserved his raise and his possible contract extension. This was a time where this defense needed to show why they were worth what they think they were, and they failed dramatically. Atlanta got beat 30-0 by the Carolina Panthers, and for that reason, they are at 23 for me. I haven't watched the game, but you don't need to see a lot to know losing 30-0 is really bad. And after last week when they beat Minnesota, and the week before where they were tough against Tampa Bay in the opener, it was like, Atlanta could be pushing for that NFC South title. They could at least maybe be pushing for a wild card spot. But it felt like Michael Penix didn't have a good control of the offense, and losing 30-0 is a bad look. 22 is the Dallas Cowboys. They got beat by the Chicago Bears on the road. Dallas lost CeeDee Lamb. They also lost Tyler Booker. So that does somewhat affect my ranking of them. They just haven't looked good yet. They beat the Giants last week, but that's not really saying much. At 21, I have the Cleveland Browns. This is the first team I feel like so far where I actually feel better about them this week than I did the week prior. They got a really good win against Green Bay where they absolutely dominated defensively. They took the ball away from Jordan Love late, scored a touchdown off of that, and they blocked the game-winning field goal, and they themselves scored the game-winning field goal. So really good week from Cleveland. They showed exactly how they could win games in the NFL as they're currently constructed, and they did it against a really good team. Carolina, as previously mentioned, beat Atlanta 30-0. This is somewhat more of just they haven't shown anything, but what they have shown, that was good. They beat Atlanta. They beat a good team 30-0. They still allowed Bijan Robinson to have a decent game against them, but I think that's going to happen against every team that plays Bijan Robinson. So I think 20 is a good fit for them here. New England Patriots, I have them at 19. At this point, I don't know what to think about New England. They were sort of a sleeper in the AFC, but they seem like they're still sleeping. They lost to Las Vegas in week 1, beat Miami last week, and then they lost again this week to a team that, yes, is good, but they need to be winning games against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They need to be winning games against those middle, more average teams. And when you have 5 turnovers in a game, you're never going to win. And that's a pretty bad taste to be left in your mouth of 5 turnovers, a lot of sacks allowed, and just a bad showcase on offense. At 18, I have the Chicago Bears. It seemed like after last week, this could be a team teetering on the edge of already falling apart after 2 weeks with a new head coach and a second-year quarterback and a team that, as they were constructed, a lot of people thought they were good. They were really good. This week, they finally got in the win column, and they took care of Dallas, and now they need to string together a few more wins to really be taken seriously, but 18, I think, is a good spot for them to be right now. At 17, I have the Arizona Cardinals. They did lose this week to the San Francisco 49ers by 1 point. It was a game-winning field goal kicked by Eddie Pinheiro. But, they're in a division right now where between the 4 teams, there's been a combined 2 losses. So, I think with Arizona, they're in a really tough division. Their only losses against San Francisco. This entire division could end up making the playoffs. So their loss to San Francisco, I don't hold a lot of weight in that. I think I hold weight in the fact that they were competitive. I know Mac Jones is playing. I know George Kittle is out. I know Jawan Jennings is hurt. I know Nick Bosa ended up tearing his ACL during that game and not playing the entire game. But I think Arizona, they showed a good performance. Minnesota, with the huge win against the Cincinnati Bengals, it seems like the tide is turning in the running back room, and they're giving more of a load to Jordan Mason in that running back room. I think that's exactly how they're going to win this year. Is they need to ride Jordan Mason on the ground or through the air, and then take the shots deep to Justin Jefferson. Now they have Jordan Addison back. If Adam Thielen can be a really good wide receiver 3 for this team, it's going to make their offense extremely efficient. Pittsburgh at number 15. I don't have a lot to say about Pittsburgh. I think it's really good that they beat New England. I think it's really good that in week 1 they beat the Jets. But last week, when they had a somewhat average team in Seattle, first off, come to Pittsburgh and beat them by multiple touchdowns, I still have a bad taste in my mouth from that game for Pittsburgh. So I just don't want to freak out about the fact that they're 2-1 and Aaron Rodgers leads the league in passing touchdowns. I want to see more consistency from this team before I really vault them into top 10 territory. 14 is the Seattle Seahawks, and while I feel like you could kind of say the same thing about the Seahawks that you could about the Pittsburgh Steelers, the thing is, they put up almost 40 points in one half against the Saints, and that came without getting a turnover. Yes, there was a blocked punt. There actually, I think, were 2 blocked punts. But they put up almost 40 points in one half. And again, without any turnovers, that's crazy to do. And so I think Seattle, they're riding high. I don't think they look incredible yet, but they're in a good spot at 14. The Kansas City Chiefs I have at number 13. There's not many teams that are better than Kansas City, but there's a lot of teams that have played better so far than Kansas City through 3 weeks. And I think 13 makes sense because the one team they've beaten is the New York Giants. And it seemed like a struggle for much of the game. So, I don't want to freak out about Kansas City and say they're going to go back to the championship after what they've done so far this year because they really have not done a lot this year. Jacksonville at number 12. They did take care of the Houston Texans in week 3. And so far, Jacksonville, I think they've looked decent. Trevor Lawrence hasn't looked incredible. Travis Hunter hasn't looked incredible. Travis Etienne has actually looked really well. And the running game in general has played well. Bashal Tutin, the number 2 running back for this team, has gotten into the end zone last week, I think, for his first time. And he's been a solid contributor in the running game. The defense, Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen, I think combined, they're probably one of the better, probably a top 5 edge duo right now. They're up there with the combinations of guys like Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, or whoever else you want to talk about, Rashawn Gary and Micah Parsons. This duo between Walker and Allen, they are up in that tier. And especially now, it seems like Trayvon Walker is fully breaking out. Last year was a good year. This year looks like it might be a great year. I have them at number 12. Baltimore at number 11. This comes after a pretty tough loss at home where Detroit either was setting the tone or they were matching everything that Baltimore was doing offensively. And late in the game, Baltimore faltered again. So from what I've seen in their fourth quarters against good teams, they beat Cleveland handedly by 20 points in week 2. Good for you. Against the 2 teams that are going to make the playoffs, with with Buffalo and with Detroit, they really played poor in the fourth quarter. So I hold a lot of weight in that. From what I've seen so far, Baltimore is not a top 10 team. At number 10, I have the Washington Commanders. Without Jaden Daniels, they put up 45 points against the Las Vegas Raiders, handled them pretty easily, defensively played well. Even though Trey Tucker went off for 3 touchdowns, if I'm Washington, I'm like, fine, throw it to Trey Tucker 1,000 times if you want in a game. As long as Brock Bowers isn't the guy beating us or Ashton Genty isn't the guy beating us, I'm fine. Number 9, the team that I think we're all really surprised about, the Indianapolis Colts. They're sitting at 3-0. They're number 1 in the AFC South. Daniel Jones is a possible MVP candidate at this given point. Jonathan Taylor himself might be an MVP candidate. The defense has stepped up. They have played well after a terrible year last year by their own words and by their own standards. Indianapolis at number 9. At number 8, I have the Green Bay Packers. I kind of fought myself over this because if you've been paying attention, Detroit hasn't been mentioned yet. And a rule I usually like to hold myself to when I'm talking about these power rankings is if I have teams in similar spots, I usually give the edge to the team that won. But Green Bay's loss, to me, might be even worse. It might affect them more if they were playing a divisional opponent. It might affect them more if they were playing a conference opponent. I think this was a meaningless loss in terms of their standings, but it's still a pretty bad loss to lose to Cleveland and look as bad as they did. I know Cleveland played well, and Myles Garrett and Carson Schlesinger and Denzel Ward, and that defense really picked the Green Bay Packers apart, whether it was through the rush, against the run, through the air. They took care of Jordan Love, Josh Jacobs, the rest of that offense. They took care of them. And so Green Bay, to me, they falter a little bit. I would have had them more top 3, top 2 area last week, but right now I have them at 8. The LA Rams at number 7, they easily could be the number 1 team in the league right now in my power rankings if that field goal at the end of the game ended up not being blocked and it went through the uprights and they took down the Eagles last week. But unfortunately, none of that happened. So now I have them at 7. The San Francisco 49ers are 3-0 after a win in Arizona. And they haven't played any of the really, really great teams yet. They played Seattle, they played New Orleans, and they played Arizona. But they still have looked good in all of those games. And to win 2 straight games especially a game in your division on the road without your starting quarterback, without your starting tight end who had an incredible start to his season. That's a good sign for this Niners team that they're going to be able to not be hampered by injuries the entire year. The Detroit Lions at number 5. This is another team I think you could put in that top 3, possibly number 1 team, but the teams I have above them all have not lost a game, all have won games against good opponents. And while Detroit has beat Baltimore and they beat Chicago last week, they still got beat pretty easily by Green Bay in week 1. And that's, I think, holding some weight for me a little bit. Maybe in a few weeks, if Detroit still has only lost that one game, maybe my conversation will be a bit different about them. At number 4, all Tampa Bay has done this year is win. They're 3-0 against quality teams. They beat Atlanta, Houston, and the Jets. The Jets game they probably should have lost, but they didn't. So I have them at number 4. Number 3, the LA Chargers. Again, a team who has only won this year. They're 3-0. They beat the Chiefs. They beat last week the Denver Broncos. They're looking like a team with a possible MVP candidate in Justin Herbert. Even though they had Najee Harris go down for the rest of the year with a torn Achilles, Keenan Allen has looked really good. Ladd McConkey has played well. Quentin Johnston has played well. The offensive line without Rashawn Slater has played well. So I really commend what they've done so far. Defensively, they've played well. Last week they played without Khalil Mack, and they still did okay against Bo Nix and the Broncos. At number 2, the Buffalo Bills. They're 3-0 again. They beat Baltimore in week 1. They beat Miami last week on Thursday Night Football. And they're probably the team I think we want to come out of the AFC and face either Philly or whoever the best team left is in the NFC, whether it's Detroit, possibly Tampa Bay, or the Rams, or maybe even the Packers. Like, the Buffalo Bills are the team everybody wants to see in the Super Bowl. They're off to the type of start that would get them to the Super Bowl. And Philadelphia at number 1. Look, man, until this team loses, I think I'm going to have them at number 1. Unless Buffalo or the Chargers or Tampa Bay end up being undefeated into week 9 or 10 and Philly still hasn't lost, I think Philly's the number 1 team for me. They haven't lost since a long time. Well into 2024 is the last time that they lost. So to me, they're still the number 1 team. To me, that second half performance that they had against the LA Rams, offensively and defensively, speaks to how great of a team that this team still could be and how good of a chance they have at repeating in the Super Bowl this year. That's going to be my power rankings after week 3 going into week 4. I'm going to try to have some sort of video out tomorrow about, weekly awards, how the end of the year season awards are currently shaping up in terms of MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, all of that stuff. So if you want to see that video, make sure you drop a like here. If you have your favorite team, you think they were ranked too low or too high, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.